Hello X-Files fans, Bored now, back with you. On this video I will be talking about the season finale, the season 1 finale of the X-Files. It is called the Erlenmeyer Flask. I almost said mask, I've done that before. And here we are, the season finale, and it really goes out on a bang, and it's fair to say this is one of the most iconic episodes of the whole show. It's one of the most important episodes of the whole show as well. It just feels like a real turning point in defining what the X-Files would become in the coming seasons, because obviously the X-Files in the debut season, in this season, has been very up and down. There's been some highs, there's been some dramatic lows as well. And it's fair to say there have been some first season jitters, but boy, it really feels like we're getting to the meaty stuff at the end of this season and this particular episode. And it's a Chris Carter script, and I mention that because he gets a bad reputation with X-Files fans for being one of like the lesser sort of writers on the show. Mostly because of the arc stuff later on, when it became sort of too like convoluted and bogged down in later seasons. He sort of feels a bit like J.J. Ambrose in that respect when you think about, maybe, although it's a different sort of example, but it maybe feels like the sort of guy who is good at coming up with concepts and ideas and has a certain vision for a show or a film, but maybe isn't the most skilled writer over a long sort of distance to like carry things through. But just reminding me of that. But anyway, to stick to my point, I mention it's a Carter script because it's a really good script. I think this is one of the best scripts he's ever produced. And it's probably because it's this sort of episode which is now going to define the show moving forward, or at least for the next few seasons, and will sets up so much of what we see, and it pays off a lot of what we've seen in this season, particularly with the Deep Throat character, who's had some ups and downs. There's certainly episodes where he's been wasted and felt like he just dropped in for an exposition dump and wasn't really needed. But this is a really great episode for the Deep Throat character, and really brings some of the stuff we've seen with him, like in EBE, for example, to the forefront, and really pays a lot of that stuff off. And I think the great mystery about Deep Throat, or the great thing about him in this episode, is in a way he goes out on a high, and he goes out kind of proving his like noble qualities. But I think also it's never 100% laid out if he was someone who could be trusted for Mulder and Scully. There's little doubts here and there, and this episode does a good job in like balancing that out, I think. So it got a 14-point rating, 14.0 rating in the Nelson ratings at the time, if you really pay much attention to that, but up quite a bit from the previous weeks, I guess, because it's a finale. And we open in a really dramatic form with almost like a full-on like action type sequence, because we have this guy who's being chased through the streets. It's like a really dramatic like car chase, and then they go off near a river and the cops are shooting at him, which is a bit excessive really, because at one point they're surrounding this guy, but he like goes over the top into the river. One of the cops shoots him and then mysteriously disappears later when Mulder and Scully are notified of it by Deep Throat. And he's the one who leads them to this case, which I guess is notable at first for not being an X-Files, but at least is an oddity, because the question mark has to be, why is there such a presence for what seems to be like just a minor offence of him like driving recklessly, or at least that's what they claim is the reason. So Mulder sort of smells a rat, and Deep Throat sort of lead him to him. And I think what I really like about the plot and the way it plays out is that it does feel like a set of breadcrumbs that slowly sort of gather pace, and they slowly spiral from this one detail, and then we move to the next detail where they get led to like this scientist who is conducting weird sort of experiments involving like monkey DNA, which sort of reminds me a lot of that weird sort of Basement Jaxx music video. And ultimately it gets on to the UFOs and these alien bodies, and the flask of the title, and we start to really build a lot of the mythology that we would see now moving forward, to do with like super soldiers, to do with like kind of abductees and their sort of illnesses, and the whole sort of cloning plot, which becomes quite a big part of season 2. But it's all tied up in this very meaty, very almost paranoid thriller type package, where it's a slow burn, there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of high drama, there's great back and forth between the characters. Again, I think it does a brilliant job of like questioning Deep Throat and can he be trusted. And I think the drama with Mulder and Scully and their sort of disagreements over Deep Throat is like really well handled in this. There's some cracking dialogue. Like you've got the scene where Mulder says, when they're basically arguing about Deep Throat, and Scully is like a Deep Throat cynic, obviously, and Mulder's like, well, do you think he does it because he gets off on it? As in, do you think he's like pulling the wool over her eyes because he gets off? And Scully's like, no, I think he does it because you do it. And it's this great sort of classic Scully line, and this sort of like rebuttal to Mulder. And I think it all sort of builds and pays off at the end of the episode. There's another great line from Mulder when he's like arguing with Deep Throat, because he kind of feels like he's being spun a tale here, and that Deep Throat isn't giving them enough that's sort of substantial. And Mulder says, cut the Obi-Wan Kenobi crap, which again is one of those really smart lines that just stands out. And I think it also shows what a clever like sort of pop culture like writer Chris Carter is, because he really, it feels like a realistic line that Mulder would say as like this sort of smart sort of comeback, but also it's a legitimate like sort of scene where Mulder is like really pissed at him. And there's a lot of talk about Deep Throat being like a father figure to Mulder, and them having this sort of relationship, and I really enjoy that stuff. That sort of metaphor, it feels quite sort of true, because it does sort of feel like that this has been Deep Throat's life work, and now he's getting a bit older and stuff, and he's can only do so much on his own. He's restricted. He has this sort of role within the FBI. So now he's seen this more youthful, idealized sort of younger version of himself in Mulder, and he wants to continue the work through him. And obviously, I think that's what makes Scully sensitive to that as well. Because obviously at this point she cares a great deal for Mulder, and I think she sort of is sensitive to, well, is this guy just taking advantage of Mulder's, his passion and his desire and the rest of it. But there's some great dialogue, there's some great tension between those three characters in particular, and I think also that there's one of the most moving Mulder and Scully scenes later on in the episode, where Scully actually has now has proof, sort of thing, about the existence of like extraterrestrials. She gets proof because they get this sample which she takes to a lab. And actually, it's this character Anne, who was in a previous episode, was in Young at Heart, I think, where I thought there was sort of like some chemistry between her and Mulder. Spoiler alert: Anne doesn't last long in this episode, but she does help Scully out, and she gives them her like the results for this DNA that they find. And I think what's really great about that is that obviously for a lot of the episode, Scully is like the cynic once again, and she's putting up barriers and saying to Mulder, no, this can't be right. This, what we're finding here, can be explained by other things. But it's actually through her research, her sort of desire to get to the truth, that she actually does find out that no, there is some evidence here of extraterrestrial beings. And I think that's one of the great things about Scully as a character, because she is fair in that way. She will pursue something and give something a chance. Obviously, sometimes she seems a bit too flippant and she is dismissive. But we've said this before with Scully. I think a lot of the times I think because she's less emotional than Mulder, it means she's also more detached, and she can maybe make a fairer judgment on the situation. And at the end of the day, if there's a case to be solved and answers to be found, she wants to find those answers. She's not going to be put off and be petty over it just because something might be revealed that she doesn't believe in. She's going to get to the truth. So I really like the scenes with her in the lab and them, examining this bacteria it is they find, and it's finally revealed that the bacteria could not be of human origins, because it basically dates back however many years it is, but to prehistoric times almost, but thousands and thousands of years, and so it could not be human. And the scientist says herself, this can only be extraterrestrial DNA or bacteria. And I absolutely love the scene where Mulder and Scully sort of meet after Scully has got this evidence, and Scully says, "I'm sorry." And it's a really poignant moment, because this coming at the end of the season is just so perfect, because throughout the season, obviously, Scully has been the skeptic, and for a long time she didn't believe in UFOs and all the rest of this stuff. But finally, in the season finale, they get some concrete evidence, and it's just so perfect, the fact that she's the one who finds it. She's the one who follows the lead up, and she comes to it. So it's actually a really emotional scene with her and Mulder, where she says, "I'm sorry for doubting you and in the past." So it's a massive moment for the Scully character, and is setting things up moving forward. And I guess it had to come eventually, because you couldn't go through too many episodes or seasons with her always being the skeptic and not believing. I think at some point you had to have like a eureka type moment. So this is very nicely done. And I think ultimately, although it's, as I said, a really good Deep Throat episode, it's a really great Scully episode, because she does go on this journey and has been on this journey. And I also like the twist of fate near the end of the episode, where Mulder, when he's getting deep into this stuff, he basically gets kidnapped by these villains, these what we're meant to believe. Like they're representing the government. They're trying to obviously cover up the whole thing. They killed the scientist. And there's this great visual, actually, this great sort of practical effect with like the sort of the flute, like the sort of I don't know how you sort of like the toxic sort of fumes that just spray up, squirt up into like Mulder's face, and the next time we see him on the ground, he's got like his eyes are all like messed up and stuff, and it just looks very good, and it's another great sort of X-Files like visual, which is something they come back to in later seasons. So the stakes are definitely raised as Mulder is kidnapped, and Scully, again in this great twist of fate, she has to work with Deep Throat because they have to work together to get Mulder out, because Deep Throat obviously has the power, he has the influence where he could get her inside this specialised sort of unit. And actually, I was watching this on stream, and Cindy, who's a regular and loves the X-Files as well, she made a very good point that she wasn't so sure that Deep Throat would have been able to get Scully clearance into the lab, and that's another good thing about this whole thing with Deep Throat is many times you can read it different ways with him, because Cindy said, and hey, he's probably setting her up for a fall sort of thing, and I'm not sure that's ever like proven or disproven, so it's actually really good writing where you could read it either way. But anyway, she appears to get clearance to the lab for whatever purpose. And I do actually like the fact that the password for her to get in is like purity control, which is just brilliant and quite believable, actually, because that is quite a niche sort of thing to get you entry. And again, I think the direction and stuff in this episode is really strong, because there are like these dramatic moments where it's just like a slow sort of build up and this slow sort of pause when she says the password, and there's like a space before the guy sort of lets her go through, and just like close up on the guy's face, almost has this very like dazed over sort of look in his eyes. But I do like this whole plot with Scully, the sort of big Deep Throat skeptic, having to work with him but to save Mulder. But the whole deal is that she has to get this the flask of the title, if you like, with this alien sort of body in it, and the idea is that they all exchange that to get Mulder back. And again, we're talking about one of the most iconic X-Files images, where she like lifts it up out of the chamber, and you've got like smoke and gas sort of like coming up out of it. It just looks fantastic. I love this stuff. It's brilliant stuff, and that's why it's going in the thumbnail, because it's one of the classic X-Files images, and it just builds to this dramatic, like, almost the end of the episode on this bridge, where Deep Throat insists that, give it to me, Scully. I need to be the one to give it to them, because they won't accept it from you. They'll wonder why you're here, that sort of thing. And there's like this moment of hesitation from Scully where she doesn't know whether to give it to him. Can he be trusted? She's questioning that right up to the final thing. But obviously, as he says, you don't have a lot of choice. And she gives it to him. And he hands it over, and it works, because they get Mulder back, but at a price for Deep Throat, because Deep Throat is killed, he's shot, and Scully reacts. It's a great reaction from Gillian Anderson. I think you see in this episode why she's such a great actress. Just the expression on her face and the angst as she sees Deep Throat being shot, because ultimately it's almost this thing where she becomes invested in this episode in Deep Throat, and because she knows that Mulder has the fondness for him, it's like, yeah, sure, she's been skeptical of him, but when she sees him get shot and dies, that's an emotional moment through her. Almost like it's like she's like representing Mulder's like emotions at him being shot. And what I like about the scene as well is that you can definitely say that Deep Throat maybe did sacrifice himself. There's something very poignant about the whole thing, because it's like he almost knew that by handing it over, they were probably going to shoot him, because hey, they're that sort of characters, and they probably didn't want to take any chances. So yeah, ultimately they're probably going to kill him off, and that's another reason why you could say he insisted and he do the handover, not Scully, because Scully would have had the same fate. So I definitely like to read it as Deep Throat like sacrificed himself at the last. And I think again, really good writing in the episode, because there is this sense that Deep Throat wanted the work to continue beyond his sort of death. So ultimately, he sacrifices himself in the episode, in the knowledge that it's a sacrifice for the greater good, because it means Mulder's work can continue. So I really like stuff like that, and it definitely. I know people are mixed on the Deep Throat character. I like him personally, and I think this is like the perfect way for him to like go out. But of course, there's by the end there's a cover up once again, and they don't quite have the proof. It's like another last minute sort of cover up, and but they obviously do sort of have something, and they at least have sort of proof now that then these things do exist. And as I said, it sets up a lot of mythology moving forward. It's a very strong episode, and we of course get another dramatic turn at the end when Mulder rings Scully the next day and says they're closing us down, Scully. They're closing down the X-Files. Word has come in from the top. And I don't know if we ever get like a concrete reason. I think it's just one of these things where, because they, got closer than ever before to proving all this, and they got the most sort of meaty stuff they've gotten yet, then I think that's what we're meant to think. Then yeah, then it's a reaction to that, and they're closing it down. And storyline wise, it was done because Gillian Anderson was pregnant. So for the start of season 2, you see Les, Mulder and Scully together, and they were sort of working around Anderson being pregnant. Now I have to say it forced them into a corner, and it does lead to some really good stuff, some really good writing and intriguing storylines. It's also a shame. I mean, it means that I think season 2 is really good from what I can remember, but it's probably a bit of a slow start because of them being separated and not together so much. But it definitely leads to some great drama. The fact that the X-Files, at least at the start of season 2, has been closed down, and Mulder and Scully are assigned to different departments. So yeah, quite the way to end the episode, quite the way to end the season, and it's one of the very best episodes this season, maybe ever in the show. It's certainly one of the most iconic and sets up a lot of the mythology moving forward. So I am gonna give the Erlenmeyer Flask a 9 out of 10. I think it's probably in my top 3 of the season. It's up there with some of the best episodes, and yeah, it's for a season finale. I think it's one of the best as well. So yeah, thanks for listening to this review. My next X-Files video will be my top 5 and bottom 5 episodes of the first season, and also just to round up my general feelings on season 1. And I hope, some of you can be involved in that and let me know your thoughts as well. So that will be coming up soon, and then obviously after that I'll follow that up by making a start on season 2 and my first review of season 2. So really exciting stuff coming up, because season 2 is when the show really comes into its own. So thanks for listening, and keep watching the X-Files and look out for more reviews. Like and subscribe as always. If you want to help the channel out, you can also share me out on social media, because that gets, sort of more eyeballs on the channel. And you can also donate. I'll put the PayPal donation button in the description to this video. But thanks for listening. See you guys soon. Goodbye.